And so I've got that going. And I'm gonna give it one more minute and I'll kick it off. I'll get my screen share on. Get that to the right place. I have to make sure I can see everybody. So I can keep admitting people. It's that oddity of Zoom. I am my own little administrator here for this. Right. So if you see me pause every now and then, it's because somebody popped into the waiting room and I'm like, oh, I got to let him in. And yes, I will share the keynote. That's a good question. Yep, happy to do it. Full disclosure, I own no stock in any of these companies. I'm just an end user. I'm just trying to share any tools or whatever. There's no kickbacks and all. At least I think I scrubbed any affiliate links from Amazon. So it should be clean. And it's just kind of in the spirit of the Chat GPT WhatsApp group that started this, is just share with you guys what I've learned. So, all right, from that point of view, I'm just going to kick it off and get into it. I named this building a personal insight engine for a very good reason. And my philosophy around this is know more so you can do more. Well, know more, know better, do better. And it'll make sense in a second. And so what I want to ask you to do is think back to when you started your company. And one of the things I love about EO is, just like me, you saw something nobody else saw. Now, a lot of people saw it, but they didn't connect the dots the way that you did. That your desire to go out and create your own company, your own business, whether it was somebody wasn't serving the market correctly, or you saw an opportunity. My dots were generators, video game consoles, big flat panel screens, and a trailer. All that stuff pre-existed, but nobody put them together the way I did. And when I put those together, I saw not the pieces, I saw a living room on wheels that 20 kids at a time could come together and play video games with their best friends and have an amazing time. And I think that capacity to have an insight, to take seemingly disconnected things and see a new connection, launched all of our businesses. Like, we all share that in common. And so my question is, like, when's the last time you've had that kind of insight and breakthrough? Typically, if you're like me, what happens is you get into business and now you're running the thing. You're busy, you've got a lot of hats, an overwhelming amount of information we have to deal with. I've coached the EO Accelerator, so I've just gotten that perspective of watching the startup where you just get consumed by bringing this thing to life. And nobody really taught us how to work with information. Nobody really taught us. What we inherit, the systems we're given, and we're given a really ineffective model of not only working with information, but working with knowledge. I mean, this stuff's pretty stone age, and there are better tools available today and better ways of thinking about those tools. And that's what I want to share with you. And let me give you an example of what I think the leap is that's coming. When writing was first invented, it had no spaces and no punctuation. It was effectively a memory aid. To know what something said, you had to already know what it said. To read it, you had to know what it meant. And here's a perfect example. If you look at that word in the middle of the screen, what does it mean? Well, you'd have to know first. And making a very small change. Well, let's put some spaces in there. Let's put some punctuation in there. Radically transformed writing from a memory aid into a container of knowledge that could be transported across time. Nobody thinks twice about picking up a book from somebody they've never heard of, never read before, and going, oh, I can get useful information out of this I can apply in my life. We do it all the time. That little itty bitty change radically transformed the value of writing. Well, Today, what we're doing is we're making computers act like digital paper. And I gotta be honest, that's just stupid. We have the capacity to make another leap in adding a little bit of information that will radically transform the way we think about the data and the knowledge we work with. And that's what I've been playing with for the last 4 years, honestly. And so that's what I want to share with you, is not just a piece of software, but the mindset and the mentality of the problem you're actually trying to solve. And if you kind of take the history lesson of how we've looked at productivity over the last 100 years, prior to 1900, it was values driven. Just be a good person, things will work out, The huge revolution of the 1920s is make a list. Doesn't that sound overly simplistic today? The Maslow was like, hey, we should prioritize those, kind of like, yeah, that's a great idea. It got even better. Covey said, boy, we need to integrate that with the quality of our lives. So you've got your 7 habits, like be a good person and be organized. And you remember those day planners? I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember those. I remember lugging one around everywhere. And then in the 90s, we digitized all that stuff. Like, well, the beginning of the Palm Pilot and PCs, but we were still in that mode. And then David Allen comes along and says, hey, we could do something new. And that was probably one of the next steps, is you can make your task list and then sort it differently. There could be different views. And that became a new mantra. It was just get it done, a lot of it, all the time. Well, we're now in 2020, the 20s. And in 2017, a book came out by a guy, I'm going to say his name wrong, On Sorkin, I think, or I'll get that right. But here's the point. It was how to take smarter notes. And that got my attention. And this past year, a guy named Thiago Forte published a book called Building a Second Brain. And what you're starting to see is a transformation in using technology as it exists today, not 100 years ago, not 10 years ago, not in the 80s, when 640K was enough memory for anybody, with virtually unlimited storage and incredibly powerful connected computing devices that are nearly everywhere. How should we be thinking about storing information and working with it? And that's what I want to share with you, is this revolution from technology and getting stuff done to knowledge management. We'll talk more about this, Tom. So if somebody can mute themselves, I've got, I'm going to just go through and quickly mute. Okay. So what I wanted and what started me down this path was a system to help me generate more of those insights. I needed to reduce the chaos in my life, switch context quickly between projects, preserve my intent. It was like I needed a tool that helped me work the way the real life in my business was letting me work. And I needed it to get better every time I invested time using it. The big ask, it's a big ask. But what I learned is that's at the core of personal knowledge management. That's what we're talking about. So I want to explain what it is, how to work with knowledge, not just try to remember things. I think that's the number one pitfall we've all fallen into, is that we believe that if we throw enough crap into some kind of junk note drawer and we could search it, we'll never forget anything, as if never forgetting is enough. Not forgetting did not create my company. Not forgetting didn't give me the capacity to see the potential of generators and consoles and flat screen TVs and trailers. Great game truck. The whole industry came out of that insight. So not forgetting is like table stakes. It's not enough in today's world. And I'm sure you're all aware of what's happening with AI, where it's not enough to be able to do the work anymore. It's enough to see what work needs to be done and how to direct it effectively. Insights have never been more important and more valuable. And you all have the capacity to do it, or you would not own your own business. So how can we do that more efficiently? How can we do it faster? It's what Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. So that's why my approach is, how can I know better faster so I can do better sooner? And that's what I want to share with you. So what is this thing? Well, first, I think we need to have an understanding of what intelligence is. And the best definition I came across was from Stuart Russell. And he said, it's the capacity for your actions to achieve your objectives. And this is a double-edged sword, because that's spot on. Like it is exactly what we think. This is what's driving AI development, is, can your actions achieve your objectives? The ugly side of that is this is why so many people are afraid of making mistakes, because mistakes are not opportunities to learn. They're proof of stupidity. I took an action. It didn't produce the outcome I wanted. I'm an idiot. So getting over that hurdle, like understanding what we're playing with, makes a big difference. What a personal knowledge management system does for you is it literally enhances your intelligence, because it increases your capacity for your actions to produce the outcomes you want, because you're being able to draw upon so much more knowledge and information. It's really a methodology, not a specific tool. There's lots of tools you can use to create a personal knowledge management system, but you need to understand what the methodology is to get it useful. So here's where we're going to draw our inspiration. Our inspiration is going to be chefs at high-end restaurants. Think about it. They have to produce high-quality food in high volume under intense pressure. They never get to shut the kitchen down in the middle of a heavy meal traffic and clean the kitchen. They never get to restart. I mean, there might be an end period, but when it's go time, they're on. And there's a whole methodology they use to maintain quality and productivity, because they screw up one little side dish, that whole plate comes back. So there's a lot of pressure there. So there's a lot of inspiration we can use to understand how we, as directors of, knowledge and people and vision, can take a similar approach to produce high quality in high quantity under intense pressure. So the core concepts here we're going to talk about have to do with goals and standards, organizing for actionability, and that associations lead to insights. The other big idea, and this is one I see a lot when people asked about the course and what I was going to talk about, knowledge management is not task management. They're separate, but a lot of the concepts benefit each other. They're very, very tightly correlated. And I could say, in my experience, knowledge management directs my task management and my priorities, not the other way around. Is that having higher quality knowledge lets me make better decisions about which tasks I'm going to prioritize. So, core skills: capture, organize, and associate. When we link our thinking, when we link our ideas, that generates extraordinary value. And that's one of the major breakthroughs that's happened with this new set of tools. I'm going to give you an example. Don't panic if you can't read this, okay? I just want you to look at it visually. On the left, you're looking at literally a snapshot from my Evernote notebook from 5 years ago. It is a classic hierarchical list, like your file tree, and it's garbage. It is the most random collection of stuff that I've ever seen, because I had that mentality: capture everything and I'll be able to search it and I'll find it. And there are things like PDFs mixed in there with business cards I scanned with, I think there's a Dungeons and Dragons character in there and some notes I typed to myself. And there's just no rhyme or reason to any of it. And it's this one-dimensional thing that just grows. And what happens is, emotionally, it becomes more overwhelming the more I use it. I don't want to look at it. I'll just throw stuff in there and search for it and pray to God I didn't forget what I called it. And that's a classic example of how so many of us keep our notes. It wasn't everywhere. It wasn't on every platform. I had my phone notes were different than those notes. So it was like everything about trying not to forget became, the more I used it, the more stressful it became. Now, in contrast, the system I'm using today, based on Obsidian, that's a graph. That's a two-dimensional network of information that shows interconnectivity. Is it super useful in its current form? No, but I'll get to the value of that. So just the way the information is being stored visually is radically different. And you're going from a linear, one-dimensional mindset to a multi-dimensional mindset. So your opportunities grow exponentially when you move to that kind of system. Now, I'm going to digress for a second and say, but what about my tasks? One of the concepts we're going to talk about really quick, I'll get to, but the best system I have found that is complementary is Michael Lindenberger's Master Your Workday Now. And this is how I organize all of my to-dos. They're in 3 buckets. It's now, like I'm not leaving today till it gets done. That's my short list. Opportunity now, things I can get done this week, things I'd like to try to get done this week. If it's not getting done this week, it's over the horizon. Everything automatically gets shoved into that bucket. So I never lose anything, but I'm operating off of, and you're going to see a very similar pattern here about what I call organizing for actionability. Is when do I need it? I use when I talk to my kids, I use my video game analogy. I've been in the video game industry a long time. I'm like, it's equipped, it's in my hands, it's ready to go, or it's in my backpack. I'm going to need it soon, or it's back at the base. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I haven't lost anything. So you're going to hear me talk about that rhythm of time and when you think you're going to be able to do it. Now, let's dig into one of the core concepts. And this is a way of thinking. And this is something that I get on a bit of a soapbox. And some of it is there's some great people in EO talking about this, a lot more science coming out. We have a goal culture, and we think goals are the answer to everything. And you'll hear it all the time. So many people are, if you don't have goals, and there's this whole thing about goals. Well, there's another side of this. And the other aspect of this are standards. And the issue is we keep trying to shoehorn our standards into goals, and that's the misfit. In balance, they work out tremendously well. And that's one of the big insights I want to share with you is goals, right? We know they're specific, measurable, action, relevant, time bound. They're super objective, right? But what hormones do they trigger? Dopamine and cortisol. I'm getting it done, completion, checklist, let's go, let's go, let's go. But why do you live where you live? Why are you wearing the clothes you're wearing? Why do you drive the car you drive? Think about your significant other, your kids. There are aspects of our lives that don't fit goals. I don't want my health to finish. I'd like to be healthy, but that's a standard, not a goal. I could have goals for my health, but my health as a category is something I want to persist for a very long time. My relationships, my home. I'm going to have to take the trash out every week for as long as I live in this place. Why? Because one of my standards is I want to live in a clean, comfortable home. When we look at standards, they're not quantitative, they're qualitative. And the hormones they trigger are serotonin and oxytocin, connection and joy, which when you talk to a lot of people, they keep hoping goals are going to produce that in their lives. They don't, and likely never will. Which gets to why so many people finish a goal and go, well, what's next? Why am I not feeling the satisfaction I expected? That comes out of investing in and sustaining standards. And so once you begin to realize there's a whole category of areas that you're going to put an enormous amount of energy, but the reward is more qualitative and subjective than objective and measurable, then it becomes clearer, oh, okay, I know where to invest my energy and not feel guilty about it. So balancing goals and standards is an important part of the system, and I'll show you how that works. And here's the heart of it. This is what I picked up from Tiago Forte. He calls it para. You could call it whatever you want, but here's the idea. You have a bucket for projects, and that's your goals. I'm working on this now. I'm trying to get it done. You have a bucket for the areas in your lives. Those are your standards. That's the roles I play in my life. I'm an executive, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a member of EO, I'm a board member. The areas in my life that I spend time all get a little bucket. Resources represent things I'm curious about, things for the future. And so if you think about them in terms of time, the now bucket, things I'm trying to get done in the near term as soon as possible, fall into projects. The soon bucket, those are things that are ongoing. I'm going to need them soon, maybe not immediately, maybe it's not on fire, but it's something I'm always paying attention to and I want close at hand. That's that backpack inventory. Those are my areas. Then the future, stuff back at the base. I don't know when I'm going to need it, but I think it's interesting. And Richard Feynman called it 12 interesting questions. The areas of your life where you're curious. This is where you feed your curiosity. Like, I don't know, but I'm going to keep kind of poking at it and see what I can do. And then the last bucket is archived. I'm done with it. It's over. I don't want to throw it away, but that's not something I'm planning on using. So what happens with this in a practical sense is I set up 4 folders everywhere on all of my systems: projects, areas, resources, and archives. So if you look at my Google Drive, what are you going to find? Projects, areas, resources. Look at my Obsidian structure. What do you find? Para. You find Para everywhere I set up a structure, which turns out to be critical because now I'm using a lot of online tools where I can't download the Canvas source documents. They have to stay in the Canvas system. I can download the results of them, sure, but the working documents have to stay inside Canva. So what do? I got Para in Canva. I'm never more than 2 levels away from anything I'm working on. And what that does in practice is, I'm going to hit this one more time about it, to make it relatable, because I get digital's abstract. Think of food. I bet you all cook or have cooked or been around somebody that cooks. Is, you know, my life, I know my role. I pay, I eat. I'm not a cook. I don't cook. I cook very little, but I love to show up and eat. But my wife loves to cook. When she's making a meal, she pulls everything out. That's the essence of mise en place. Everything at your fingertips. It all comes out on the countertop. That's a project orientation. Most of the time, what we do is what we picked up from the stupid software we use. Is that I get this all the time from, oh, my Word documents are in the Word folder and my spreadsheets are in the spreadsheet folder. We sort things by their type. Unless we're going to do something like cooking. That's ridiculous. We never do that. We store it by, I'm going to use it now, it's all around me, or it's in the fridge, I'm going to need it soon, or it's in the pantry, it's for the future. If we start thinking about our knowledge that way, you start to realize that actually makes a lot of sense. And since storage is virtually unlimited, unless you're doing like 8K video, you can keep lots of copies of things. It's not a problem. So this storing it by type, like, look at this. Here's your standard Windows. Well, I got a desktop, documents, all kinds. You have no idea what's in that folder. Oh, and then the music, maybe that makes some sense, but every kind of picture, does that include my logos and my headshots? Do they go in there? Oh, and then my videos. I mean, it's just like, it's stupid, but it's the default everybody picks up, is that I'm just going to organize by what a thing is. It'd be like taking all the fruit, whether it's frozen, canned, or fresh, and sticking it together in one spot because, well, they're the same type. We would never do that, but we do it with our data. And you can see that, bit redundant, but it's overwhelming. Now, this is a busy slide, I admit, but the first thing I want to point out is on the left is my storage. On the right is my Obsidian database. They have the exact same structure and the exact same names. That's why it's a methodology. It's a convention. So the first thing that happens is just opening this system adds value because it immediately lists my priorities to me. So as soon as I open it, I can immediately get it reminded what's important. These are the projects I'm working on. And if they're not important anymore, I should be archiving them. And if there's something missing, I should be adding it. So one of the most important parts of this system is that every time you touch it, you have the opportunity to improve it and make it more useful to you. So instead of getting hit faced with a bunch of random nonsense, I'm getting my priorities presented to me every time I touch the system. It's an opportunity for me to think about what's most important. Now, in this particular instance, you can see the red line. What I've done is I've circled that this talk that you're watching right now started out in Obsidian, but I needed to create a bunch of graphics for it and some other art that I'm not going to store in Obsidian. I'm going to store that in my OneDrive. So the same folder, same name, same structure exists in both places. So in a few seconds, I can look across all of my content and find every single asset connected to this work. So I've drawn it all together and it's easy for me to pick up where I left off. Because that's the important thing. I'm going to get interrupted. I've been working on this thing for, I think Quanta asked me to do it like a month ago, maybe in early February. And so I started pulling stuff together immediately. But I could leave it, come back to it, leave it, come back to it, and never have to think about, where's my stuff? It's always, quote, on the countertop, ready to go, which preserves its context and allows me to pick up where I left off. So I can context switch like I've never been able to do in my life until I started this system. And one other thing, I've got standards highlighted in yellow. You pop that open, you get the same thing. The things in my life that are important to me, and by making sure that I'm spending time on them. So for me, this system I find crazy valuable because it's functional, but it is also giving me value back because it's a reflection of what's important to me at the present moment. It is the best representation of my priorities that I could ever have. I don't have to go look at a separate list. I just have to start using my system. Now, when you dig into this, getting everything in one place, here's an example of many of the images that ended up in this presentation and some extra ones. Why do I have notes? Because that's where I started drafting it. I started outlining it and brainstorming and pulling together all the information that I wanted to share with you in my notes database. That has become the nexus of my creativity system. And as I said, duplicates are not a problem. Guess what? There's a copy of the Game Truck logo in that folder and in a bunch of other folders. And it works because when I archive this, if I have to go back in the future and pick it up, I'm going to have access to absolutely everything I use to create this presentation. There'll be no broken links, there'll be no disconnects, and it'll be safely archived so it won't get accidentally reused somewhere else. And it gives me a clean space to do my work. So my practice looks like this as a flow chart. Capture, distribute, and link it. So the most important thing is Obsidian as a tool runs on every single device I have, and it is synced. So if something happens, I get an idea, I get a note, I'll show you this, what my process looks like when we get to the show and tell. What you'll see is I capture the notes, put them up there, and then later during, maybe I'm waiting in line, maybe it's the afternoon and I'm just like fog, no more creativity. I can open my note system and start going through it and start filing things into separate files. There's a concept of one note per idea, is you want to create sort of an atomic file. And what that allows me to do is make it easier to link ideas and reconnect them. You don't have to do it. It's the way I do it. But what you're seeing is as long as I capture it, then later I can be like, oh, do I need this for a project I'm working on? Or is this a useful piece of information for, I'm a seed moderator. Oh, I got this note. Chuck Bender gave me a suggestion. I'm like, oh, I captured it in a moment later. I'm like, oh, I should put that in my seed moderator notes. And it ended up in there. So there's this productivity time I have where I'm distributing the information later where I could think about what its value is to me. And if it's none of those things, then I just archive it. Don't have to delete it. Don't have to throw it away. I'll just, shove it over in the archive and move on. Now, why is linking so valuable? Remember I showed you the graph? The definition of an insight is when we connect two unrelated things. And what happens here is if I graph, like one of my core notes is how to make friends as an adult. These other notes are all interrelated. Any path you walk through your note base is an opportunity to create a new association. This whole system exploded in two communities: medical students, because everything's connected, and content creators, because the internet's appetite for content is voracious. Now, maybe ChatGPT will make that worse. Maybe it'll make it better. But if you're trying to generate insightful, innovative, original content, this is one of the most effective ways to do it, because every path through that network is a new and unique story, perspective, or idea. And that's why I call it the insight engine. So once you start seeing the graphs fill out and meandering through your notes, could suddenly give you insights that you might not have recognized before. Yes, there it is. Insights are connections of unrelated ideas. Psychology today, the neuroscience of insight. So it's not just an opinion of mine. That's literally what it is and how it works. And if you think about it, we're getting closer to storing information the way our brain stores information. Our brain isn't a list engine. It's not a database. It's an association engine. It's a meaning-making engine. And that's what it means to switch to a personal knowledge management system, is you're extending the knowledge you have access to create more meaningful. Oh, somebody asked, what is Novus Vault? That is the name of my vault. You can name it whatever you want. An Obsidian set of files is called a vault. So real quick overview, and then I'll show you some live demos of what my system looks like. So you're going to see my live database. But what I said with projects, I create folders, They always have the name project hyphen, so when I archive them, I recognize it was a project. But I throw anything and everything I can into that, and then I replicate it anywhere that I have to create an asset for that. And like I said, for example, in Canva, I can't move the source files onto OneDrive, so I'll make a power folder there. So that is, my methodology for projects. Another one that has just saved my bacon has been for travel. I create templates that I reuse all the time. And that's one of the concepts you begin to get into with knowledge management is you create these Lego blocks of work that you start reusing over and over again. We all have, as business owners, processes we do so infrequently, we never get great at them, but we can't delegate them. How many people at your company can talk to the bank? I can never seem to get that off my plate. They always want to talk to me. There's always some stupid, tedious BS thing I have to do once a quarter for a financial institution or insurance company, whatever. And I'm like, oh my God. Well, that's a process. It's like, think of it as personal process documentation. I've done it once. I figured it out. I don't want to spend 3 hours on that again. I want to be able to do it in 5 minutes. So getting my travel right. I'm the worst traveler ever until I went to this system, which was, what do I need to know? What questions is my team going to ask me? What questions is my wife going to ask me? What questions is a customer going to ask me? All of that went into creating my travel templates. And so now when I'm starting project, I've got everything there. And over time, as the information fills in, I get a complete picture of what I need to do and where I need to be. And it's worked out for me. It's like way less stressful. I manage writing projects. Like I've got a whole series, a year-long set of blog posts I do for the strategic coach. And I wanted to get out in front of that. So managing that entire workflow is all starts inside of Obsidian. And I have the capacity to export everything as Word documents, send it to the publisher, it gets done. But the capacity to keep that bundle of ideas connected to all its source material in one place, magic. And here's the most advanced example I have. I'll walk you through it. It's probably the most dynamic thing I had done. My forum went on retreat and we wanted a new exercise. We wanted to get to a level of, it's not enough to know what your problem is. You need a tool to fix it. So we wanted to create a tool that would help us, get unstuck wherever we've all got a blind spot. So if you had a blind spot that was holding you back, could you get unstuck? And the way this came about is I use a piece of software called Readwise, which connects my Kindle highlights to my Obsidian note base. So just by reading my Kindle and highlighting, all that information gets dumped automatically into Obsidian. I then use, I often create, as soon as I finish a book summary using all my Kindle highlights. They're already there. So I will highlight and summarize notes. It's a great technique for embedding knowledge and making sure that you remember it, because it's like, explain it like you're talking to a 12-year-old. Well, when this thing popped up, I had all that information. I used an Obsidian canvas to pull all those notes out into like a big paste board and look for the commonalities and went, oh, that's the tool set we're looking for. That fell into a new note, which I exported into the Word document, sent to our moderator, and he goes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. He had one other request, and what it was is I used ChatGPT to write the prompts to give all the members during the exercise so that they were set up correctly. So I've integrated ChatGPT into my workflow. I took knowledge I had consumed from reading, turned it into something that was actionable that I could share with the rest of the team. That for me is the state of the art, and how I work with knowledge is that what I need is at my fingertips in a format where I can combine it in new ways to solve problems that are important to me, and then share it with people that I care about so they too can act on it. I think that's pretty cool. So let's take a look at the real thing. I'm going to switch screen share here for a sec. And we're going to take a look at Novus Vault. So let's get to today's notes. Hopefully there's nothing too embarrassing here. I'm being very vulnerable here and just running it like it is. Okay. So this is my daily note. And I happen to have a lot of interesting little plugins. And one of them allows my chat GPT to run right inside of my note base. And one of my forum mates told me, he goes, hey, chat GPT will write mermaid scripts. I'm like, it will? And so I plugged it in, tested it, and sure enough, it started generating, you know, these little graphs inside of here. And I'm like, oh, that is just absolutely amazing. One thing about Obsidian, I will tell you, it uses a language called Markdown. And this is my engineering background. I'm totally comfortable with this, but it's actually a practical thing. Google Sheets and Word drive me crazy because when you copy and paste between them, the formatting breaks, and we're spending endless hours. I end up spending just minutes doing tedious, the spacing's wrong, the font's wrong, the heading's wrong. Like, why can we not copy and paste between two documents and not have them fall apart? Oh, and then you go to your learning management system, and God help you if you want to paste into that. I write in Markdown because it captures my intent very succinctly, and it will export into whatever I need it to turn into. So my stuff doesn't get crushed. And I'm like, I generate and export. And so a lot of what you're going to see is just very simple text files. But some people get intimidated by Markdown. I've found it to be lightning fast. I never have to take my hands off the keyboard to use it. And all the notes are in that fashion. The other advantage of Obsidian, you could do this with Evernote, LogSec. I don't think you can do it with OneNote because I don't think they don't support the backlinking. But use whatever tool you want. The main other advantage to me of Obsidian, all of these files are on my local hard drive. They're not stored. They're mirrored in the cloud, but they're not only stored in the cloud. I am stuck paying Notion $5 a month because I have 10,000 archived notes up there that I cannot get out in any usable format. They're only exported in some weird JSON object that I'll have to pay a programmer to figure it out for me. Maybe ChatGPT can fix it for me. So this tool set gives me projects, areas, resources, archives. You see a bunch of other folders here because some of the tools demand their own folder, but the top four, absolutely para. My list of projects, there's the retreat exercise. Let's take a look at the insight talk. So I create a top level note that allows me to say, here's everything else that's in the folder. Sometimes I fill these out. This time I didn't. I'm not human. I guess I'm human. But then I started going into what are the talking points? What's interesting to people? These are my earliest thoughts that led to this talk. I gave several early previews and people gave me feedback. That's why you're seeing demos right now, because they're like, I'd like to actually see what it looks like. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And as you look at the list, like I said, as soon as I open it, I see things like, I know I am way behind on landscaping my front yard. I better get busting on that. But just reviewing that is opening it up, gives me a reminder of what my list of priorities are. When I talked about travel, one of the cool things you can do with this software is install, there's a list of plugins. Data View is a super powerful one. It pulls across the entire database any travel templates I have. So I store the travel template in the context it makes sense. So for my speaking gigs, I store the travel in area speaker. If it's related to work, I store it related to work. If it's related to family, I store it in family. But I can pull that information across all of the areas. As you can see, game truck, father, speaker, EO president, GLC's coming up. Those records are all available, and all I have to do is click on one and boom, I'm in that specific record, and all the information, the agenda, where I need to be is all present. So I found this to be insanely valuable because it ends up being like a database. And to give you an example of that retreat exercise, that was one of my personal favorites. Let's see, I'm probably staring right at it. There, retreat. There's the canvas. It's probably really small. I'll zoom in, but the core books were Phil Stutz, Sorry, I am having a hard time getting my mouse to work correctly. But bottom line is The Tools was the name of his book. And in the book, he goes through a series of tools to help you deal with different problems or areas of your life. And I was able to take each tool, break it down, find out, who's it for, he has these cute little cards that are in there. And I captured all those and I was able to put them in there. So this became like my first project was grabbing all this information and reviewing it and then laying it out and getting clear about what I was going to do with it and why, and connecting other sources until
my truck.
I had enough information to
Probably
be able
take
to
it down to
work through this. I'm sorry, could you mute yourself, please? So this is the one that generated ultimately the handout that we gave to our forum and we ran with. So those are some of the things of how I use this. And to come back to the presentation, make sure come back to that. I think I should still be sharing the screen. Obsidian's base package is free. You can install it and play with it yourself and poke around with it. The sync is that is a fee service. It's about $100 a year. I find it well worth it. It's also the fastest way for me to share images between my iPhone and my Windows PC, because I can just take it, stick it in a note, and boom, it is on my desktop virtually instantly. But it is on my iPad, it's on my MacBook, it's on my phone, it's on everything. My flow, like I said, I capture, spread out, but this Readwise path with the Kindle is just magic for me, is having my ability to read a book, capture highlights. I've got over a decade of highlights are now available in my system, and I found that to be insanely valuable. Here's the source material. This is what started me down this path. The book, the first one was How to Take Smart Notes. I did read Master Your Workday Now next, and A Mind for Numbers. But Building a Second Brain would be, if you want to start anywhere, start with that. Like, that would be the book. If there's one shortcoming I found with Tiago's work, he doesn't really emphasize the value in linking. He loves the PARA system. He loves a system called progressive summarization, which is useful, but this capacity to link ideas and connect them, not a priority for him. But that was, for me, that's half the value of this system, is generating insights from what I've learned and what I've gathered. One place to start, it will freak you out, and then you'll have this huge moment of relief if you're brave enough to do it, is create your 4 PARA folders, then make a folder called Archive and give it the date, and drag everything else into that folder and then archive it. Suddenly you will have a clean desktop. Suddenly you will have clean documents. Suddenly you'll have clean folders. You haven't thrown anything away. But what you then begin to do is only pull information out of the archive as you need it. So you're working on something new. Go, well, I've got a client proposal, project client proposal. Go back into your archive, find the files you need, pull them into that file folder. My experience after I did that, I pulled like 3 to 5% of what was in my archive folder into my project folders. So very little of what I was hoarding actually was useful to me. And getting the clutter out of the way freed me up to start thinking in the new system very, very quickly. It was a little unnerving at first, but then you're like, I didn't delete anything. I just put it in another folder. And that turned out to be a phenomenal move. So to recap it, we're trying to create a system to work with information organized by really its urgency or its actionability. What do I need now? What am I going to need soon? What is useful or interesting or relevant for the future? And that cooking methodology is probably the most relevant. Should it be on the counter around me while I'm working on a project? Should it be in the fridge where it's close at hand, ready to go? Or is it in the pantry or in the garage where I got to go dig it out, but I know it's there? And the review process, organizing things into those buckets, it doesn't take long. Like once you get in the habit of it, it's easy to do on an ongoing continual basis in a few minutes. And the associations, that's connecting notes together. And it's as simple as within Obsidian, typing the name of another note that creates a link to the next note, and it pops it right up and away you go. So I use Obsidian to catch it all, process it later, and I link as I process. And that continues to build my system the entire time. A list of plugins. Again, I'll share the deck so you can go through it yourself. And I will be happy to share my templates. There's little bits of code that I had to write. Happy to share my learned lessons there. But data view, that's the one that lets me pull all my travel things together into lists. Templater really does a great job of taking a template and filling it in with smart information. Calendar lets me manage my daily notes. So every day I open my phone, brand new daily note pops up, ready with prompts for me to go. And TextGen is what connects to Chat GPT. One other thing about my note base, I can publish sections of it. And so a lot of this information is already or will be published under publish.obsidian.md, Scott Novus, that link. And so like when I'm managing my accountability group, I'm always giving them resources. I publish them through that interface, so it's always available. And I found that ability to create and push out to be crazy valuable. And that is a wrap. That's the whole talk. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stop my screen share now. And if anybody wants to post anything, either unmute yourself and ask or raise a hand, I'll do my best to get to you. Or if you want to put something in the message chat, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask my first question?
Absolutely.
I got so many questions. This has been just absolutely amazing. So I, first of all, really appreciate you sharing all of your experience with us. My first question is just, it takes a certain amount of organization with anything, but do you have a threshold with a new app as far as like, okay, this app seems useful enough for me, I'm going to start installing this, this folder system?
So what was important to me was that I grew this organically. You're looking at 2.5 years of notes. So it didn't start out looking like this. It started out like an empty, there were 7 folders. There's the 4 para, attachments, daily notes, and templates. Those were the 7 folders I started with. And what I just started doing was like, I did what I was advising you guys to do, is I threw everything into the archive folder. And then I thought, okay, what am I working on? And I started making project and area folders depending upon my priorities organically. Every day I'd add a little bit. Every day I'd clean up a little bit. Every day I'd be like, well, where's that? I got to find that. And the practice of starting clean and then saying, what am I working on? Is it a project? Is it just a task I just need to get done? Is it some standard-based activity in my life? That started sucking data back into the folders, but also started making it clear to me what my priorities are and what was important. And reoccurring problems like travel were like, well, that's a candidate for a template. That's a block that I'm going to do a lot of. It turns out a block that I do a lot of is creating technical writers for talks. If I'm going to show up, we're going to play video games, I need to give you a lot of information as the host of what you have to do so we can make that work. And that ends up being different from almost every talk. So I went from like the first one that took me like 3 weeks to make to now I can do them in 5 minutes, because I'm always templating and reusing my work, but it grew organically over time. So if you just start with the basic structure and you start thinking, okay, how do I pull everything together? The biggest risk I see is if people don't take the leap of archiving everything, they get sucked back into the old system. And you put your Word documents in the documents folder, you put your images in the image folder, and your shit's scattered all over everywhere and you can't find it. And you think search is going to save you. And what I learned this year was that we change how we think about things. A few years ago, I made a scorecard. Now, since I made that document, we rolled out EOS in my business, and a scorecard is now something very different to me. So I stopped thinking of the original thing as a scorecard, and I started thinking of it as an assessment, because that's a more accurate description of what it is. I couldn't find it because I was looking for assessments. I knew I made it. I couldn't remember what I called it. And then I had to track it down some other, it took me like a week to find the stupid thing. It was like, wow, search completely failed, because what search can't factor in is how you've changed, how your understanding has evolved, and how your terminology works. We're constantly shifting. But in a system like this, I rapidly find things because the way our memory works is associations. I made that for a culture kitchen project. So I would get to it through the culture kitchen in a matter of moments. But if I had to know what it was called, it took me a week to find it. So doing it organically for me was critical. I don't have to be perfect at once. And as long as I keep using it, it keeps improving and getting better.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, hello, Scott. Thank you for everything. I'm actually reading Tiago Forte's book at the moment.
Awesome.
And I've started doing the folders, and I'm doing that in my email as well. And it's just like a massive change. And I'm actually I downloaded Obsidian, but I'm not a technical guy. I love all this kind of information, but I'm not a technical guy. So I'm having trouble with the plugins. I've downloaded some. Right. Do you have any resources you could share so we could, because I see that you suggest that we look into Google for the basics of Obsidian, but there's tons of information. It's like you get 1,000. I've seen like 5 different authors of Obsidian. All of them are great. They think they're great, but it's just like want the core things so I can use it better. Because otherwise, I'm afraid of using it, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. I did the same thing. I started with a handful. I didn't want to get corrupted. I wasn't sure how useful they would be. I know exactly what you're talking about. So,
and the other question, sorry, is how do you use the tasks, the to-do list? You mentioned you still use them. How do you put them on the system? Because it's totally different.
It is totally different. So I don't keep my tasks in Obsidian. I keep my tasks in this goofy program called Remember the Milk. And in our business, we use monday.com for project management. So for me, when I'm fleshing out my personal ones, I use a dedicated task app for a variety of reasons, because I found Obsidian's unwieldy to keep my tasks. What it can do is I can make a list of like, this is what I want to get done today, like really quick, and then I copy it over into RTM. And that's why I said my Obsidian informs my task priorities. Like, this is what I'm working on. This is what's important. But the task list itself, I just found it's way better to use a dedicated task manager. Obsidian, there are people doing it. I'm not, it's just too much work. It's very fragile. It breaks constantly. I'm like, it's not good at that. Like, you have to put a lot of energy into it. I want simple things that are easy to use.
Thank you so much.
For the resources, yeah, I will put together on that link from my site the plugins I use with some of the template code, so you could see what it does and how I use it, so you could do it as well.
Thank you. Great.
Anyone else?
I have more questions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people join. I'm super happy. I hope.
Read my mind,
I know I
Ask my
fire hosed
questions
you
for
all
me.
with information. So
Trevor, why don't you go first? I always have
No,
questions.
I don't have any questions. I don't even know what questions to ask. I'm just kind of sitting here trying to
wrap your head around it. Where do you begin?
Yeah,
Like, oh my
I'm
gosh.
not I'm not.
Okay, so my question is,
Years out of my brain. Go Quan.
you have all these projects. How do you prioritize those projects? Because I saw you saw, oh, okay, obviously I haven't spent enough time doing something in the garden. So how do you prevent that in itself becoming like it's just a huge list that you can't manage anymore?
Man, that's a never ending struggle. And I'm not particularly good at it. I'm pretty fired up. I hope you were relieved to see that you're on the list. At the bottom, because it's alphabetically sorted, not priority sorted. And that's part of the value I get out of it, is that when I have priority stored somewhere else, I never looked at it. And so every time I'm working on a project, anytime I pop open that project folder, I got to look at it and go, okay, I got a lot going on. I got to start retiring some stuff. And some of them I have to walk away from because they're not as high a priority. And other ones are, yeah, I got to make sure I'm working on that. The key thing is, the real red flag for me is when I'm working on something that is not in that list. I'm like, what am I doing? If it's not a standard, so it's not one of my core values. I mean, that's really where standards line up, right? Am I spending time on relationships? Am I spending time on my health? Am I spending time, the giving back to EO or those things? Like, but if it's not one of those and it's not a project, like, what am I doing? Stop, like back up or reevaluate, take something off the list and move something else up. And that's okay. I mean, sometimes, like, we're opening another office in Denver. That was not on any of my list till the opportunity presented itself. And we're like, we got to move. We have to do this. It bumped a couple other things off my list. There was some project work I was going to do that I'm like, not getting to that, archive it. And I can pull it back out of archive in the future, but it can't stay on the list because I'm not going to work on it. So the best I could say is that I try to make it reflect what my intentions actually are. And if they're misaligned, I either have to fix my intentions or I got to archive the folder. But I don't lose anything. That's what's so powerful, is it's easy to just go, stick it in archive because I can come back to it later. I just want to stop looking at it.
Thank you. I have one more question, and this is hopefully for the sake of everyone else to transition into this tool. So obviously you've been working on this for a very long time, so you kind of like ease your way into it. But for those who want to make a mind shift change right now, I know we basically take the leap in archive, but what basic habits do we need to start building now on a daily basis so that it gives us the easiest way to jump in and not just feel completely overwhelmed?
I would install, so this is what I taught my kids to do. So I would share the same thing with you. Install Obsidian on your number one computer and on your phone, because you always have your phone with you, and sign up for Obsidian Sync.
Okay.
And now your phone's with you wherever you go. The app is excellent. And the setting up the daily note habit is crucial. So you have a bucket every day where you can dump information. And so if you just begin capturing it and you're putting it into your daily notes, that starts to get you in the habit of keeping sort of this digital journal. And just that step alone starts getting you in the habit. And what I have found watching my kids do this is 2 of them are in college. 1 of them is out. He suddenly said, oh, he's into mixology and cooking. So it's like all of his recipes, all of his mixes, all of that became this library that he started building inside of Obsidian. And my daughter, who's, she's always getting projects. She's in engineering school. She was like, I got a new assignment. Boom, create a project, get it done. And so you start to see opportunities to use the system once you start thinking about it that way. And so just getting in the habit of having Obsidian set up on your phone and on your number one computer. And then once you begin to start thinking about with this lens of what is this? Is this just a task? Like, hey, take the trash out. I'm not going to make a project to take out the trash. But I got to take it out. Right. It's like, take care of it. That starts to become, like my wife saying, hey, we really do need to update the front yard. Like, well, that's really part of the house. It's part of one of our goals. That'll be a project. We'll finish that. But the standard for the house remains always in my list until we move out of this home. I have an area for me around being the engagement chair for my chapter. I've done that for a year, and in May, when we switch over, I'll archive that whole thing and all of its resources. But I've already opened a new one for president-elect. So to me, it's like, once you start getting in the habit of asking, what is this? Is it a goal? Is it a standard? Is it just something I'm interested in? That high level decision creates a scaffold for your knowledge. And for me, it's way better than, what kind of file is this? That's about the least useful thing I think you could ask. Oh, it's an image file. Well, it's an Illustrator file. Well, that's a spreadsheet. What good is that? Versus thinking conceptually. Oh, this is the budget for the front yard. Put it in that project file, not with all the other spreadsheets.
Thank you. That's been amazing.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been a blast. Thank you for letting me share my crazy passion for trying to think better. And I hope you found some value in it. And I'll put up more resources on my personal website and the link that'll get shared. And yes, I will send the deck to Quan, and we'll find some way to get that shared with you. And
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Scott.
Cool.
Appreciate it, buddy.